Hello everyone, I watched a video of Washington Gun Law TV. The narrator was the gun law president, William Kirk. Here is my clean, policy-grade breakdown of what this video actually establishes, why it matters, and how it reshapes the Minnesota ICE shooting debate. No fluff, no slogans, just law, structure, and consequence. What this video actually does. This Washington Gun Law segment does one critical thing no viral meme does. It moves the case out of ideology and into Minnesota statutory law, where the case will actually be decided. Not on Twitter, not on cable news, not by feelings, by statute, imminence, and articulable threat. That alone collapses most of the emotional arguments currently driving the public reaction. The legal axis that controls this case. Everything turns on one legal hinge. Was the ICE officer in imminent danger of death or great bodily harm at the moment the trigger was pulled? Not 10 seconds earlier. Not motive. Not a protest context. Not politics. Only those few seconds. Minnesota law is blunt on this. Minnesota State Statute 609.066, Peace Officer Use of Deadly Force. Deadly force is justified if an objectively reasonable officer would believe that force is necessary to prevent death, great bodily harm, an imminent threat that cannot be safely delayed. If a vehicle is accelerating directly toward an officer at close distance, that meets the definition of a deadly weapon in motion under Minnesota precedent. There is no gray area on that point. A car is legally a lethal instrument. Duty to retreat does not save the meme narrative. Minnesota is a duty-to-retreat state in public spaces, but retreat only applies if retreat is safely possible. When an officer is already inside the strike envelope of a moving vehicle, there is no safe retreat window. At that distance, reaction time is measured in fractions of a second. Legally, that voids the duty-to-retreat argument. So the most common online claim, "He could have moved," collapses under basic kinetic reality. Why all the backstory doesn't matter. The Rittenhouse parallel used in the video is correct. In self-defense law, what happened before the moment of force usually has little legal weight. Only this matters: location of bodies, distance, direction of movement, rate of acceleration, ability to retreat, reasonable perception of lethal threat. Everything else is narrative. Courts do not try stories. They try moments. The rhetoric that actually made this more likely. Here is where the video becomes uncomfortable for politicians. Minnesota law explicitly prohibits force against officers performing official duties after announcing their presence, which ICE did. So the protest as physical obstruction strategy used in many jurisdictions places civilians directly into felony-grade confrontation zones under state law. When elected officials normalize physical resistance language, they are not creating activism. They are creating legal collision courses. This incident is not random. It is structurally produced. Why this matters nationally? This case will become a reference point for protest police confrontations, border enforcement operations, use of vehicles in resistance encounters, federal-state jurisdiction conflicts, future riot and obstruction policies. And if prosecutors bring charges that ignore statutory imminent standards, it will signal to every officer nationwide that their legal shield is now political, not statutory. That would destabilize law enforcement posture across the country. Bottom line, under Minnesota law, a vehicle accelerating into an officer at close range legally qualifies as a lethal attack. If the videos reflect that reality, and one clearly suggests they do, then the shooting falls squarely within statutory self-defense authorization. Not morally, not politically, legally. And that makes this case far more dangerous for the activist narrative than most realize. Because if this becomes a wrongful force precedent, every police and federal officer in America becomes legally exposed while performing announced duties. Which means public order itself becomes optional. That is the real policy risk. And it is far larger than this single case. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, and leave a comment. Also, please follow to learn more.